Welcome to episode 12, How to Write Persuasive Copy in Your Brand's Voice.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast with Ranjini Joshua, the only podcast that teaches you how to strategically navigate the world of public relations and social media and grow a powerful brand.
Hello, and welcome to episode 12. Sometimes when we're writing content for our websites, blogs, social media, and PR, we got lost in what we're writing about and often lose direction in what we're trying to build as a story and trying to tie that story to our brand message. So today, I'm really excited to have a marketing strategist who specializes in brand strategy and copywriting. He's been hired by some of today's most influential thought leader brands, including John Maxwell, Donald Miller, Suzanne Evans, and Catalyst. Today, I'm really excited to be interviewing Mike Kim, the host of the Brand New podcast, speaker, and marketing expert. Hello, Mike. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm excited to be here and be here with all you guys who are tuning in, and I hope to add some value to you today.
Yes, absolutely. Mike's podcast is one of my favorites. It's the Brand New podcast. I get ideas from it all the time. So if you haven't checked it out, please go to the Brand New podcast and listen to it right after this. In my last interview with Finian, we actually talked a lot about choosing a lane, maintaining authentic voice and brand aligned with your business goals. But today, I really wanted to cover a more tactical focus and talk about the copy, how to keep it authentic, and even more importantly, how to keep your copy persuasive. And Mike is the expert at that. So I'm excited about this. I'm going to be taking notes as well. So let's dive right in. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Okay, cool. So there's so much noise out there and everyone really tends to sound the same sometimes. How can a brand say something that's unique? And I know that's a super loaded question given today's temperament.
Yeah. So one of my great passions is helping people discover their voice and then take all that they want to say and distill it into something that's easy to remember and then just deliver it. Right. So I'm a discover, distill, deliver guy. That's what I do. And I just do it through words. And so what I tell people is that, or the first exercise that I walk them through is I ask them just three simple questions. And I've ended up calling this framework the PB3 framework. And I call it, PB stands for personal brand, 3. And it doesn't matter what kind of brand you have. People want to hear a more personalized voice unless it's like something super serious like law or healthcare, right? But outside of those things that are very, very serious, very grave things, people are connecting more with this personal voice. And so I'll take a small business through this. I'll take the thought leaders who I've worked with who have brand equity for years, and I'll just ask them these three simple questions. Number 1, what pisses you off? Number 2, what breaks your heart? And number 3, what's the big problem you're trying to solve? And what pisses you off, that is the injustice that you see in the world. Mm-hmm. What breaks your heart is the compassion you have for people. And what's the big problem you solve? That's your business, because business is nothing more than solving a problem for a profit.
Right.
And so much of the time when I work with a business, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a coach, you name it, I'll ask them, well, what do you really want to say to people? Like, what is your business about? And they'll say something, oh, we help people bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And I'm just like, okay, snooze, right? Or like, we help people clarify their message so that people engage. Like, oh, snooze, right?
Right.
And then it's like, what do you want to do with your life? I don't know. Because if you asked me when I was in my 20s what I wanted to do with my life, I literally would have told you, I think I want to move to Fiji and like just live on the beach and drink pina coladas all day and read books.
Right.
And that's not actually what I really want to do with my life.
Uh-huh.
Because when we view everything through just the positive lens, this is very counterintuitive, we end up with vanilla answers.
Right. Yeah.
But if I ask you what you don't want to do and then just choose the opposite of that, or I ask you what you hate and then choose the opposite of that, you actually get more of the real voice. So I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but is it cool if I give you an example?
Yes, please, 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 please.
Okay. Right. So the people will ask me, like, when I was working in my corporate job as the CMO of a company just outside New York City, and it was a good job, right? And people are like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, if you had $1 million, what would you do with your life? I'm like, move to Fiji, right? And sip on pina coladas, right? But then when I started to ask myself what I hate about my life
Mhm.
at that season, in that season, I hated commuting over an hour every day, one way. So I was 2 hours, 2.5 hours in the car. I hated that.
Mm.
I hated meetings that were pointless. I hated not getting things done because we had so many meetings. And let me just stop there. If I
Yeah.
just take those three things I hate, flip them on their heads, and think about what the opposite would be, it would be this. I hate commuting means, and what do I love? Efficiency,
Right.
maximizing time. I hate meetings. What do I really mean by that? I love taking action and doing work that matters.
Mhm.
I hate not getting stuff done because we have pointless meetings. I love fast execution. So now when someone asks me, what sets you apart as a marketing consultant or as a speaker or as a coach? Well, I can promise you this: if you work with me in my program, we're going to be really efficient with how we use our time.
Yes.
We're only going to do things that matter, and we are going to execute. Now, that's a very simple way to just get to the core of what you want and what you really believe.
Yeah.
Whereas, most of us just try to like kind of come up with some nice fluffy slogan.
Oh yeah, the
And yeah,
right? So many words to
yeah.
choose from.
hmm So that's one way that I do it. And, people like, I don't know what to say. I'm not very clear. And I tell them this: clarity comes through a marriage of movement and meditation. It's a dance. You got to jiggle it back and forth. Like if you've ever had your car stuck in the snow
Mhm.
and you're, on the side of the road and you're trying to pull out the
Yeah.
car, you don't just turn the wheel one way and hit the gas. You turn the wheel, move forward. You turn the wheel the opposite way. You move backwards. You put it in reverse, right? You try to jiggle the car out.
Right.
And
Right.
too many of us have one way thinking when it comes to our messaging. And that's why it's all sounds the same.
Mhm.
And so we copy another brand that's out there that sounds like they have some clarity, and we just copy what they say because we're doing one way thinking. You
Yeah.
have to use the power of contrast and the power of opposites to kind of jiggle your way out. And that's really how you find your voice.
Yeah, I've never really heard this concept, and maybe I just haven't done enough research of the using this what you hate and creating the opposite. I really like that because it really kind of addresses your own pain points, and I think that's
hmm
what you're doing, right? When you're building a brand, you're addressing pain points for your key audiences. So this is really a unique way of a unique perspective of looking at it. I can appreciate that
I think
quite a
it's my
bit.
weird sadistic side.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And you have like endless sayings for days. I want to put you in a magic 8 ball at this point. So it's pretty cool. So okay, so like the next step, right? You've kind of come up with the stuff that you've hated. You hate. I mean, you've identified those things. When you're creating copy and you're doing, I mean, I know you do a lot of podcasts on email marketing and landing pages. So when you are creating copy for different mediums, how can you not so much keep your brand voice unique? I think you're trying to stick to those challenges, but how do you, I don't know, how do you write for that? I mean, it seems kind of tricky. It's interesting when you say it verbally out of your mouth, but how do you kind of like hone in on the copy for those kind of things?
Yeah, so I kind of like, I don't have kids, but I have two young nephews, and I've
Okay.
seen, my sister parents enough to kind of hear this very, very common phrase. Parents tell their kids, use your inside voice.
Yeah.
Don't use your outside voice inside, right? And and that's how I approach writing for different mediums. We have Facebook, which is different than Instagram, which is different than Instagram stories, which is different than TikTok, which is different than, Twitter, and you name it, right? And
Yeah.
which is different than LinkedIn, which is different than a blog, and which is different than a podcast, and which is different than a book.
Yeah.
So right there, I've probably named like 8, 9 different mediums, right?
Right.
And you don't write a book using the same kind of language or verbiage or tone that you use on Instagram stories.
Right.
the publisher won't allow it. So whether we realize it or not, we already do this. We already adjust our voices to the medium that we're talking about. So we already do this. We already adjust our voice for the medium that we're, using. So what I would say is start with the medium that you're using the most. And chances are, if you're using it the most, it's because it's the most effective and it's the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when someone asks me, how do I get started in content creation? And if they're just an individual, which is different than a company, right? Which is different, all that's different. But if a friend came to me and said, Mike, I want to be more active on social media. I have ideas that I want to share with the world. Where do I start? I would simply ask her, what's the most fun social media channel for you to use?
Mm-hmm.
And they might say, oh, it's Twitter or it's Instagram. Then I would just tell them, use that one. Because if it's fun, you've already removed one of the obstacles to doing it, which is that it's not fun, right? And
Right,
so it's a
absolutely.
bite-sized way to dip your toes in the water. If you already know how to use the app, if you already know how to generally communicate on that, well, then just get in the habit of creating content for that channel. So many of us, like we think, oh, well, if I want to get serious about marketing this business, then I've got to sound serious. And that's
Right.
not true. It's not true. It's not true. And so that's where I would start using the medium that you are most comfortable and most, familiar with. That's the most fun. Now, if you're a company, and I've worked with tons of small businesses, and I was, again, the CMO of this company, and our main channel at that time, this is years ago when I was working there, was print mail. We sent out direct mail. And it
Wow.
was every year, it was a $350,000 expense. Right.
Wow.
So I was like, well, we better nail that one.
Right.
But the second thing that we better nail, if we're going to do print stuff, is we better nail it on other print advertisement, right? Newspapers and stuff like that, because we're publishing there.
Sure.
The third thing we better nail it on is email. Because as soon as they see one of these things and they sign up on our website for something, they're getting emails. Because we weren't doing social media marketing, we weren't doing content marketing, we weren't running Facebook ads. So email was the most important thing. So I doubled down on the email for that particular business. It was an educational company.
Mm-hmm.
And being that it was an educational company, guess what I couldn't use? Emojis. Right? Because there would be a misalignment there.
Right.
And so all of this, it just depends on the channel that you're going to use. But what drives all of that is the movement that you're trying to launch, or you're trying to start, or you're trying to stir up. And what I mean by that is this: people hire marketers because they think good marketing will lead to more money. And that's sort of true, but it's a half truth, because you can't market a bad product easily. What was the age old saying? You can't put lipstick on. Yeah, you can't put lipstick on a pig.
Right.
Is what they used to say, right?
Yeah.
And so, if I see a brand and they actually answer those PB3 questions, what pisses you off, what breaks your heart, what's the big problem you're trying to solve, then I have the makings of a movement.
Right.
And that is what I want to tap into. What is the movement you're trying to start? Years ago, there was a guy named Dr. Don Berwick, and he was the head of like the National Healthcare Institute or something like that. And at that time in the United States, like medical malpractice was like the 6th or 7th leading cause of death. The doctors were just making mistakes because they were overworked or negligent or whatever. And he stood in front of a room of his colleagues, and he didn't say, we should try to reduce preventable harm in hospitals. This guy understood messaging, or he hired somebody who did. And he stood in front of this room and he said, I believe that we should save 100,000 lives by June 4th by 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. or something like that. That is a movement.
That is a movement.
Then
for sure.
Yep.
Yes.
The marketing team took it and they created what they call the 100K Lives campaign. That's how movement and marketing work hand in hand.
Yeah. And you see similar campaigns like that now. I think I've seen other, I mean, not exactly like that, but like, we want to reach this milestone. This is where we're going towards.
Because it's not just clear. It's not enough just to have a clear message anymore, right? We're kind of teasing the whole, we're going to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That's clear, but it's not compelling. It's not like, oh, hell yes, let's go do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what people want. Ultimately, that's what people want. And so when I look at messaging, this is why I love working with personal brands, is because they usually start the business because they believe in something,
Right.
right? And so that's how we get to the core of that.
Well, something you said kind of sprung me in this kind of last question, and it's kind of a little side note, but it's a big deal. You're talking about the right medium and picking the medium that was right for you and one that you think is fun. And you mentioned, for some people it's email. Now, specifically in today and what we're all going through as not a country, but as a planet, I guess, as the world. How do you find the right voice in email when there's so much coming at you? I get emails. I get so many emails. We all do. How are we navigating this? Like, how, as a brand, how can I put out an email that I know, let's say I feel really good and authentic about the content and I feel like, oh, this is content people should use, but how do we get through that like noise?
Well, first would be the subject line. The subject line, obviously, that's the headline for the email. But I think one of the things that is really separating the brands who actually really know what they're doing with copy versus the ones who have just kind of been able to float by is that those of us who are students of the copywriting game, there are other psychological things that we tap into regularly that the mainstream doesn't. And I'll give you an example. One of those things is mystery. It's curiosity. Because if you give away everything that's going to be in the subject headline, people are just going to click out of it. They're just going to ignore it because they just know it's so predictable. And that is one of the big dangers of marketing today, because everyone's getting better at marketing, or maybe not better, but they're using kind of those vanilla, headlines that everyone's been using, for a long, long time. Right.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. Like 5 tips to working from home. Okay. 6 surefire best practices for leading your remote team.
Right.
Or something like that. And kill me now.
Yeah.
There's no mystery in that. And there's actually, if you really think about it, there's no personality in that.
All right.
There's nothing like that feels organic about that. It sounds very professional, and it's just not what we want. It's not what people want right now. It's not what they're like responding to. They're responding to people because people are in a very emotional place at this moment, right? And so a lot of times with my headlines, I will just put something that sounds completely random or very personal. For example, one of the best email lines that I've used over the years is, not sure if this is for you, but ... And that ... keeps an open loop, and there's mystery in that headline, in that subject line.
What is he talking about?
What is not for me? I don't want to be left out. Like, this is for Mike. I kind of trust him. What is he doing? Right. And in a lot of ways, I will tell people, use this phrase in your subject line if you have multiple audiences, but you have no segmentation. So, for example, if you're a relationship coach and you have married couples and divorcees and single parents and 20-somethings all on your email list, inviting everyone to a webinar on finding the right life partner or 5 keys to a better marriage, that's going to rub people the wrong way. Single people don't like to be reminded that they're not married.
Right.
But the beauty of that phrase, outside of just being, mysterious, is that it has a nuanced apology. Like, you, the author, the sender, the brand, are admitting you might be wrong in sending this email to them, but they'll forgive you for that. And here's the kicker. Some person might get this email and pass it on to a friend who is actually married and say, yo, man, I got this email. I like this guy. I follow him online. Obviously, I'm not married, but I think you and your wife could use this webinar. And boom, right?
Right, absolutely.
It's a very doable like subject line that will, like, don't go to the well one too many times, but when you're stuck, like, that kind of subject line is going to get attention. Another example, I tell people to use 1-word subject lines whenever it warrants it. And you're like, wait, why? Because if you think about how it visually looks on your phone or on your computer screen when you get emails, right? If all the subject lines are longer than the space that like Gmail allows for them, right? But then when you have a one word subject headline, it creates this empty white space on your inbox.
Right. It kind of looks
Does that
like
make
it's
sense?
just
Right?
like a friend sending you a note
Yeah,
or
it
something.
looks like
Yeah.
it's blank,
Yeah.
right? So one of the best subject lines I ever wrote that converted, literally the subject line said fun. That's it. Fun. It didn't say top 6 tips to have a blast this summer. It just said fun. And everyone wants fun or fun
Yeah.
inside, right? Everyone wants that, right?
Right.
Another one, just 3 exclamation points. People like, wait, what? Is this an error? And they open it. And those are very personal. They're very, very personal. Now, I wouldn't want you to send that email if you're a physician, a
Right.
doctor, or a lawyer, right? You want to maintain that professional voice if you're in an industry like that. But if you can get away with this, that is a great way to kind of get people to engage with your content.
I love the exclamation points. It could
Yeah,
be anything. It
yeah,
really can be anything.
yeah. It could be anything. I mean, it's that surprise and that mystery, and
Right.
most of us underestimate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think people think about their subject line and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a good one." And even sometimes, I'll send myself, the test emails to see what it looks like, and I think, "Oh,
Mhm.
this is a great subject line." But at the end of the day, you're right. They're pretty generic. So, yeah, I mean, we all kind of fall back to these things that we think are clickbait, but they're maybe not really.
No, they're not. They're not. And the idea of clickbait, of course, it's clickbait. We want them to click. What clickbait has now been equated to is when the subject or the headline has nothing to do with the content and the content is not valuable. That's actually what
Right.
real clickbait is, right? And so what I tell people is that if you can stuff your email and you can train your listeners or your readers or your subscribers to say that, you know what, 80% of the emails I get from this brand are good. They're helpful. They have something of substance to say. Then you're good. That's all you really need, right? So um, these little tactics I'm giving you and sharing with all of you today, they'll work, but they'll work initially no matter what. But they will only continue to work if you continue to actually add value to people and make your
Right.
emails valuable, right?
Yeah, you can't keep giving them, crap content. If, like you said, you can't
Yes,
dress up a pig
absolutely.
or put lipstick on a pig. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, and that kind of actually leads me to another question. We're talking about email specifically. There's a lot of places where we're going to have copy, and I think you can actually do this in on your website or for social and things like that. But how do you still think? And we all have our thoughts on this. How relevant do you think email still is, given the amount of emails everyone's getting every day and the kind of information overload? Is email really still the best way to reach somebody?
Yeah, it's if here's how I phrase it. Like, if someone were to gain access to your phone, that's terrifying, first of all, right?
Yeah.
Right. And the first thing that you'd be really, really worried about is that they'd be seeing pictures, right? Like maybe a ton of really bad pictures or whatever. But
Right.
from a business or like a professional, like a real life standpoint, a criminal standpoint, the last thing you want them to be able to access is your email, because everything is in your email, right? Your
Right.
one email account. Like, yeah, it might be embarrassing if they get your text messages or have access to your photos or even your social media accounts or whatever. Outside of your banking app on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
your email account is the most personal
Personal.
thing that you carry.
Yeah.
And so for someone to say to you, I want you to contact me through this channel, that is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And there's an age-old saying, the money is in the list, and it's still true, because people don't buy things off of Facebook or on Instagram. They just don't do it. They do it on Amazon and they do it on Pinterest, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't do it on these other social media channels. And the smarter marketers are using social media to get people onto an email list,
Right.
so that because they purchase through email. And so when I look at when I look at how people behave, the money really, really is in the list. And this is what I tell folks, especially if they are not a brick and mortar brand.
Right.
Because again, I work a lot with thought leaders and speakers and coaches. And I tell them this. I said, you have no other asset in your business. No one's going to buy a single thing if you decide to sell your business, not sell a product, sell your business. No one's ever going to buy MikeKim.com from me. They're not going to buy it. They're not going to buy my Instagram feed. They're not going to buy my YouTube channel because it has no subscribers, whatever. But the one thing I could theoretically sell if I wanted to is my email list.
Right.
And that is the only asset that I have in the kind of business that I run. And so when I look at my business as a solopreneur, as a consultant, I have a small team of contractors. I look at my business and everything is geared towards growing the email list because my business is a baby that needs to be fed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what it eats are email addresses.
That's
and
so
I have
funny.
to just keep feeding it. Yeah.
That's so funny. And I love that you said that because I like the baby analogy, but I love that you said that because, I've done a lot of work in crowdfunding and we've never been able to really stress how important emails are to crowdfunding campaigns because it is the smallest gap to get someone to purchase something. And you say it a few times and people hear you, but they don't listen about how important it is that email list is queued up and ready to go before you launch your crowdfunding campaign. And I think I think crowdfunding is a very physical and direct and like fast example you can give because, it's so time sensitive, but that's not more apparent than in crowdfunding. And I tell people that all the time and they come to me and they say, well, I have a list of 500 people. Well, I mean, okay, well, that's the list that you have, but that's going to measure the success of your crowdfunding campaign. And the best crowdfunding campaigns have the biggest lists for sure.
Yeah. And this is what I also tell people is that, okay, do you want to run Facebook ads? Do you want to run social media ads? They're like, yeah. I was like, okay, do you know that we could take the people on your email list and target them directly? And their eyes light up. They're like, well, you can do that? I was like, yeah, we don't randomly just run ads. You just send it to the people who are on your email list, and then Facebook and whoever else will find people who behave very similar to that person. It's called a lookalike audience,
right?
And they're just like, what? That's possible? Getting back to your initial comment, like, are there too many emails? No, and I'm like, I hope more people email because most of them do it poorly.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, that makes me stand out even more. And I've had people write me literally say like, you are one of only 3 email lists where I read every single email you send. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's
really validating.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. It's kind of like, this is maybe a bad analogy, but it's like you go to like a bar or something like when we can all actually go out and socialize again. Right.
Yeah.
And there's like, like a whole bar of really, really good looking people. And you're just like, that guy stands out, but no, whatever. Versus like you go to a bar of like really average looking people or not very good looking people. And that one person just really stands out.
Really stands out. The same guy.
Yeah. That's what I want. Like, I remember like my friends would watch like beauty pageants and stuff like that. And, all the girls are watching like the Victoria's Secret show and they're like, that girl is so ugly. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's on the Victoria's Secret runway show. She's like the top 0.001%. And they're like, she's ugly because it's relative to context.
Right. And so you're looking at so many beautiful people.
Oh, yeah. Or they say, oh, he's work hot or she's work hot. Right. Uh-huh. And so to me, I'm just like, if there are like a lot of bad emails being sent to people, great. Yeah. All the better for me because I'm going to try to stand out and be really one of the good ones.
Right. I view
that as a good thing.
Yeah, I really like this idea of the email list really being your asset. I think people need to realize that. And so when they do other things like social advertising, creating website content on LinkedIn, driving people to that email list, I think is an important lesson to know, especially as you're building a new brand. I work with a lot of startups, so lots of brand building is going on when we're doing PR. And often the call to action is kind of lost. And so if the call to action is to sign up for an email list, I think that's a one, really easy thing to do. And two, sounds like the most valuable thing you could probably do.
Yeah. And so, even with that, like what I try to do is, this depends on the brand, right? But when it comes to the calls to action, whether they're on emails or on social media posts or anything like that, I try to have a lot of fun with the call to action whenever possible, whenever it makes sense, right? So one of the things that I'll do is that, depending on the conference or even a guest blog post or podcast that I'm on, right? I will write up a bio for them that is going to be a little bit more fun and make the opt-in a little bit more appealing to people. So I wrote one of these, a while ago for a client, but I'll just use my name instead. So
Sure.
I wrote something like, right now, Mike Kim is juking rocks and mountains while sailing along the coast of Brittany. But you can download this short ebook that shows you how to get 100 plus subscribers from every blog post you write. Like that's fun. There's some personality in that, right?
Yeah,
one of the things I wrote, I used this a lot a couple of years ago when I was speaking at some events that were a little bit less stuffy, right? They're a little bit more fun. And it was like, Mike Kim's a real world marketing pro and creator of the do-it-yourself blog guide. And so I'd link to that. If you're ready to learn how to market your business without doing stuff that would embarrass your mom, stop in and download his free ebook here.
Yeah.
And so even right there, you can bake in the calls to action to something fun and something personal.
Yeah.
Because when you make people laugh or you stir up emotion and you get away from that predictability, they're more apt to take an action. It's like when you see a funny meme and you hit like, and you're like, why did I do that? He doesn't need more likes. There's 35,000 of them already. But it's your way of reciprocating a positive emotion that you just felt. That's really deep. You guys got to lay a hold of that. Like people will reciprocate for a positive emotion that you make them feel.
No, this is amazing. I feel like in this short amount of time, you've given us like life lessons to learn for just emails in general, but also email marketing and social media. I mean, I feel like there's a lot that we can take away here. And usually in all of these episodes, we have some resources and best practices that we'll post along in the show notes. So please look out for those. We'll pull in some maybe email best practices and put them on the site. But I think lastly, I feel like is a really important question. We kind of touched on it. Many people have this question right now when we're talking about new product launches. And I actually was on a call with a group of companies and brands yesterday that were really concerned about their messaging and how to be a like proactive marketing person in a time where people are so worried about their personal life. So how do you see this marketing landscape playing out right now? And how do you think people should approach it? I mean, my advice was to kind of just take a more human approach. And even I love what you're saying about inserting some fun into like your subject lines and your ads. But what do you think? Like, what is a good kind of caution that you can take as a brand to be sensitive to what's happening in the world, but then also, you need to have business. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And here's what I would honestly say, that it's going to depend on the timeline. And so here's what I mean by that. Based on when we're recording, when we're doing this interview, we're already in about week 3 in the United States of like a nationwide thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know this may sound crazy, but in week 3 and beyond, people are going to settle into a new routine.
Yeah.
The shock and awe of it is it's still kind of crazy, but we're going to get used to it. Now, if you're selling the very first week and you're just like not acknowledging what's going on, people are still in a state of shock, that's a different story. But right now, they're actually not really in shock anymore.
Right.
They're they're settling into a new normal.
Yeah. I was about to say that's the new term being, thrown out, which is very true for everyone. We're in a new normal situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that, you can take comfort in the fact that people are still going to need to eat. They're still going to need to, buy clothes. They're still going to need supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, they're still going to want to be productive with
Yeah.
their time.
Even more so, I feel like.
Yeah, even more so. They still want to get away from their kids who are driving them crazy right now, right? And it's just understanding that right now people are actually starting to settle in and come to a point of acceptance. You acknowledge what's going on. You acknowledge that stuff isn't the same and it probably won't be for a long time, but it's shifting our language from survival to adjusting and adapting.
Right. Okay.
And that is what you can do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're all trying to adjust and adapt. I would take out words like struggling and surviving. We're all struggling to adjust. No. We're all adjusting. We're all adapting because people need leadership right now. They need good leadership.
Yeah.
They need positively show them that there's a way forward, right? And one word can make a difference, right? One word can make a difference. So I really try hard to acknowledge what's going on, but I don't want to use words that are going to trigger those kinds of emotions.
Right.
Because people are still kind of getting out of it. And they're already feeding enough, negative. They're already feeding themselves with enough negative stuff on the news. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just change and adapt your voice from survival and struggling to adapting. And I think that's really going to be able to help you guys, help everybody. Yeah.
No, that's great advice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much also for your time today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And I really like to get this perspective. It's very different, but I think this is something that everybody needs right now because I feel like a lot of people that we've been talking to are struggling to figure out what their message should be, how they should position it, how can they still be fun while, running their business and kind of dealing with this personal time. So I really appreciate your time today and everything you have to say. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
And if you have a moment to plug yourself, I'd love for you to share what you're working on right now, how people can get more, marketing and tips and advice and any plugs that you have for your websites. And of course, the Brand You podcast, which is my favorite thing in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, let people know where to find you.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening to a podcast right now, you might as well just jump over, like Regina said, about my podcast, Brand You Podcast. A great episode to start would be episode 196, which is on email subject headlines.
Perfect.
So I flesh out those a little bit more on that episode. We have a giveaway there that where you can just download various email subject headlines. I have resources on that. And actually, what I'm working on, because I've been locked up now, it's actually forcing me to focus. Because for a while I've been working on a book on branding and messaging, really. Mm-hmm. And people ask me, how do you come up with these messages? Don't just tell us what to do, or tell us don't just tell us we need to have good messaging. How do you create it?
Right.
And so I'm some of the stuff that I shared with you guys today, using opposites to kind of jiggle my way to getting clarity. It's just a couple of those kinds of things that I'm working on that I'm really excited about. And it'll be a short, little quick reference guide for all of us because all of us have to create content. Yeah. And I just want to share some of my best practices and little hacks that I use to do that. So look for that in the next 2 months or so. I'm working on it right now.
Okay, great. And that's probably going to be available on MikeKim.com. Yeah.
Yeah. MikeKim.com. And if you use social media at all, Instagram is the place to find me. That's what I love using. My handle is MikeKimTV.
Okay, great. Thank you so much again. If you guys have any questions, suggestions, comments about this particular podcast or any other podcast, feel free to email us at podcast@thesilvertelegram.com with questions or comments, or if you want to connect with Mike. Also, all of Mike's links will be on the show notes, so you'll be able to get access there. Thank you for listening and joining us today. That's all for now. Stay healthy, stay positive, and be authentic. See you next time.